Max Verstappen to McLaren has gone from idle paddock gossip to the single loudest story in Formula One, and that's exactly why you should be suspicious of it. Every name attached to this supposed deal is currently denying it, on the record, in public. So take a breath, and if you like the sound of a story told straight, quietly hit subscribe, because we're not here to sell you a done deal. We're here to work out which side is lying, the mountain of smoke, or the wall of people insisting there's no fire. Because one of them has to be. Start with what's actually real, because underneath the noise, there's a genuine, verifiable situation, and it's serious. Red Bull, the team that owned this sport for years, has built a car in 2026 that Max Verstappen cannot win in. Deep into the European season, the four-time world champion sits 7th in the championship. No victories. A machine bleeding lap time to Mercedes and Ferrari, struggling with the sport's dramatic new engine rules. That near 50-50 split between combustion power and electrical deployment that has scrambled the entire grid. This part isn't rumor, it's the standings. And the cruelty of it, for Red Bull, is that the wound is partly self-inflicted. The team spent years and a fortune building its own engine division, Red Bull Powertrains, specifically so it would never again depend on another manufacturer for its power. Independence was supposed to be the ultimate strength. Under the new 2026 rules, that same in-house project has become the anchor, a combustion and hybrid package that simply hasn't hit the target while rivals surged ahead. The most dominant driver of his generation is spending the prime of his career fighting for scraps in a car his own team's grand plan built. And his frustration is no longer something he bothers to hide. At the British Grand Prix, after his race unraveled, that frustration spilled out over the radio in an X-rated burst that told you everything about how thin his patience has worn. Everybody, including him, can see it. That's the pressure behind everything else. Because a Verstappen who's winning is a Verstappen who never thinks about leaving. A Verstappen stranded in 7th is a different man entirely, and the paddock knows it, which is why one particular rumor has caught fire. And there's a reason the rumor fixates on McLaren specifically, rather than anyone else. If Verstappen really is looking for a fast car, the list of teams that can offer him one is brutally short. Mercedes, long his most linked destination, has locked in George Russell and the teenage phenomenon, Kimi Antonelli, who's leading the championship. No room. Ferrari has Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton on long deals. No room. Aston Martin is a rebuilding project. Run down the grid and only one team sits at the very front with a car capable of winning now. McLaren, the reigning constructors' champion. Which means if this story is true at all, there's really only one place it can point. The claim is stark, that Zak Brown's McLaren, the reigning champions, are quietly building a route to sign Verstappen, and that to make room, they'd push out their own driver, Oscar Piastri, in a straight swap with Red Bull. It's a jaw-dropping idea, a generational champion, trading places with a race winner, and it would rearrange the entire top of the grid in a single move. There's just one problem with treating it as fact. Every single person named in it is denying it. Firmly, publicly, and by name. Begin at the top, with the man who'd have to sign the check. Ask directly at the British Grand Prix whether McLaren had held talks with Verstappen's camp. Zak Brown didn't hedge. They're rumors, he said. No conversations. He went further, and it's worth hearing exactly how he framed it, because he's speaking on the record. I'm very happy with my two racing drivers, Lando and Oscar. Anytime a name like Max is thrown around, everyone gets pretty excited. A four-time world champion, but I'm very happy with our driver lineup. He even spelled out the logistical wall, saying that with two drivers already in the seats, there was simply no seat in his race car he could offer. That's not a man leaving a door cracked, that's a man shutting it and standing in front of it. Then there's the other half of the supposed swap. The driver the story says is being sacrificed. And here the denial is even sharper, because it comes from a man who spent his career refusing to be pushed anywhere. Mark Webber, Piastri's manager. Speaking to Racer, Webber didn't diplomatically sidestep the rumor. He went at it. Oscar is contracted to McLaren for the foreseeable future, he said. Talk of him agitating to leave is nonsense. There has been a lot of fiction written about him and other teams. McLaren have repeatedly said they want him for the long term, and Oscar is focused on that. Nonsense. Fiction. Those are the words of the man closest to the situation, and they are not ambiguous. What about Piastri himself? Asked about all of it at Silverstone, the Australian sounded like anything but a driver packing his bags. I've got a contract in place, he told reporters. I've had multiple reassurances that the team are very happy with me, and I'm very happy with the team. Calm, settled. The exact opposite of a man being quietly shown the exit. It's true that Piastri's own season has given the rumor mill something to chew on. This is a driver who won multiple races in 2025 and led the championship for a stretch, before a second-half slump dropped him to third by the end of the year. That dip has followed him into 2026. He's been out-qualified by Norris more often than not, and sits some 15 points behind his teammate, a gap that, for a driver of his talent, invites exactly the kind of speculation now swirling around him. But underperforming your teammate and wanting to abandon a championship-winning team are two completely different things. And only the first one is actually supported by any evidence. That's the wall of denial. Three of the most directly involved people in the entire story, the CEO, the manager, the driver, all saying, in plain language, that it isn't happening. If you stopped there, you'd close the case. But this is where it gets genuinely interesting, because a rumor this size doesn't catch fire over nothing, and some of the smoke is real. Take the piece nobody disputes, because it's a confirmed fact, not a whisper: Verstappen's exit clause. His manager, Raymond Vermeulen, has openly acknowledged that Max's Red Bull contract, which on paper runs through 2028, contains performance-based release clauses. This is the mechanism the whole story hangs on, and it exists. It's real. The widely reported trigger is tied to his championship position around the mid-season break. If he's not near the top of the standings, a door opens. Here's where I have to be honest with you though, because the draft version of this story overreaches, and the truth is messier. The exact timing is disputed. Some reports say the clause activates at the summer break. Others say the window runs from the break all the way through October. Verstappen sits 7th, far adrift of 2nd, so the performance condition looks comfortably met. But the clause is unlocked this instant is more certain than the public reporting actually supports. What's fair to say is narrower and still dramatic. The mechanism is real. The performance trigger appears to be within reach, and for the first time in years, Max Verstappen may genuinely have a legal way out. That's enough. It doesn't need inflating. Then there's the second piece of real smoke, and this one's harder to wave away, because it isn't a rumor at all. It's a confirmed hiring. Gianpiero Lambiase, the race engineer who has been the voice in Verstappen's ear through every one of his championships, arguably the single most important working relationship in Max's professional life, is leaving Red Bull for McLaren. That's confirmed. And you don't have to imagine a conspiracy to feel the weight of it. When the one engineer who understands a driver better than anyone walks into a rival's factory, it means something. But, and this matters, because it's exactly the kind of detail the dramatic version leaves out, even that has a sober counterweight. As Juan Pablo Montoya has pointed out, Lambiase is moving into a more senior leadership role at McLaren, not stepping back into a race engineering seat. He wouldn't be on the other end of Verstappen's radio. So the move is real and symbolically loud. Red Bull losing elite talent to the team it's supposedly about to lose its driver to. But it is not, on its own, proof of a signed deal. It's a data point. A loud one. Not a smoking gun. So line the two columns up, because that's the only honest way to see this. In the smoke column, a genuinely broken Red Bull car. A champion stranded in 7th. A real and reportedly triggerable exit clause. And his trusted engineer defecting to Woking. In the denial column, the McLaren CEO, Piastri's manager, and Piastri himself, all saying flatly that nothing is happening. Both columns are full. Both are real. That's what makes this the most genuinely uncertain story on the grid right now. Not a confirmed coup, and not nothing, but a live contradiction that hasn't resolved yet. And there's one more voice worth adding, because it cuts against the draft's whole Red Bull is panicking and powerless framing. The man now running Red Bull isn't Christian Horner. Horner left the team in 2025. It's Laurent Mekies. And Mekies has publicly, almost casually, dismissed the idea that Verstappen is halfway out the door. "I'm not asking Max every week if he's going to stay," he said at the Austrian Grand Prix. "Max has made clear to us that he wants to continue with the team. It's equally clear that he needs a fast car for him to be happy." Read that carefully, because it's doing two things at once. It's a denial, and it's also an admission. Yes, he wants to stay, but only if the car is fast enough. And right now, it isn't. The backdrop at Red Bull only sharpens the question too, because the team around Verstappen has been visibly reshaping itself. Horner's departure in 2025 was the biggest tremor, but it wasn't the only one. The team that once looked immovable has been shedding and reshuffling the very people who built its dynasty, while, on the other side of the paddock, its old design genius Adrian Newey is now working elsewhere and reportedly beginning to shape rival machinery. A driver takes note of things like that. When the architects of your success start leaving the building one by one, the building feels less like a fortress and more like a place you might one day need to leave. None of that is a signed contract either, but it's the emotional weather this whole story is unfolding in. That single sentence is the real story, underneath all the rumor and all the denial. Not a secret contract, not a done deal. A condition. Verstappen's future doesn't hinge on some boardroom plot that's already been executed in the shadows. It hinges on whether Red Bull can build him a car worth staying for, before his patience and his claws both run out. Everything else is noise layered on top of that one brutal equation. Now, to be completely fair to the other side of this, the rumors aren't coming from nowhere, and I won't pretend the denials settle it. Some outlets report that Verstappen's management has held informal, exploratory contact with McLaren, and one, GP blog, has gone as far as to say its sources believe an announcement is growing closer. Reports out of Brazil claimed Piastri wanted out after a rough British Grand Prix where he finished well outside the points. And the calendar itself adds fuel, because of how Formula One's driver market actually works. The biggest contract moves rarely happen in the open of a race weekend. They happen in the quiet of the summer break, the 4-week shutdown when factories go dark, and away from the cameras, the year's most explosive deals get quietly assembled. With the Hungarian Grand Prix, and Verstappen's reported clause window, arriving right as that break begins, the timing is almost too neat. Jenson Button, watching it all, offered the two words that haunt every one of these sagas: money talks. Even Zach Brown's own phrasing, that talks didn't go anywhere, quietly concedes there was something to go nowhere from. Denials in Formula One are not always the end of a story. Sometimes they're just the version that's true until the day it suddenly isn't. Here's the uncomfortable thing about denials in this sport specifically. Even a completely true deal would be denied at this exact stage. No team confirms a champion's signing while he's still legally contracted to a rival. It would invite tampering accusations, poison the current season, and hand the other team months to prepare a defense. No manager announces his driver is leaving before the replacement is secured. The denials we're hearing are precisely the denials we'd hear whether the deal were dead or nearly done. That's what makes this so maddening to read from the outside. The public statements are almost useless as evidence, because they'd sound identical in both worlds. Which throws the whole question back onto the only things that can't be spun: the car, the clause, and the quiet movements of the people around Verstappen. So where does that leave us, honestly? Not with a confirmed deal. Anyone selling you that is ahead of the facts. But not with nothing either. What's real is this: the most dominant driver of his era is trapped in a car that can't win, holding a contract clause that may already let him walk, while his most trusted engineer packs for the exact team everyone swears isn't signing him. And every powerful person in the story is standing in front of a camera, insisting there's nothing to see. Maybe they're telling the truth. Maybe the deal really is dead. Or maybe, when the Hungarian Grand Prix ends and that summer break swallows the paddock, we'll all find out that the loudest denials were hiding the biggest move of the decade. So here's the question worth sitting with. When this many powerful people work this hard to tell you nothing is happening, do you believe the words, or do you believe the smoke? Tell me where you land in the comments.